Good to go, Dr. Mahdi.
Wonderful. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We are delighted to have this session, one of the last sessions in the ERF conference, but one of the best sessions, in my opinion, with two very exciting papers, very interesting papers that I would actually recommend anybody who teaches a course on Middle East development economics or Middle East economics, current affairs, and so on, to include these papers on the syllabus, because these are very interesting papers to read and also very informative. So I hope this would be useful for most of our audience. With that said, let's not waste time. In this session, we're going to have two presentations by Mustafa Ulus and Ahmed Öztürk. It's delighted to be with you. And each presenter would have 20 minutes. And first, the presenters would present their papers. And then after that, there would be a discussion for 20 minutes. And then the remainder of the time would be spent on Q&A. Of course, the presenters can go slightly over time, but that cuts into the Q&A time. I would strongly encourage both of you not to go over time. I would actually tell you halfway during your presentation, in the first 10 minutes, that 10 minutes has passed and you only have 10 minutes left. And then in the last 5 minutes, I also tell you, and also in the last 2 minutes. So you keep track of time. With that said, two more things that I need to say. One is that during the presentations, you can ask questions by asking those in the chat box, but limit your questions to clarification questions. If you have any questions about something that needs to be clarified. But your other types of questions, you can ask them at the end after the discussion is over. We would have about 20 minutes for Q&A, and you can ask questions then. And there you can ask all types of questions. When it's time to ask questions, you can raise your hands at that time, and then we'll call on you, and then you can ask your questions. Or you can, of course, ask them in the chat box as well. But during the presentations, only use the chat box. Wonderful. Let's start with the first presentation. I think, Ahmed, you are first. If you would like to go ahead and present your paper. Am I right? You were first, or Mustafa was first? Yes, I think Ahmed was first. Okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mahdi. Let me share my screen. So, is that okay? I can't hear you, Dr. Mahdi.
Sorry about that. I was on mute. So if you press Control-L to have it in full screen format, that might look better. Okay. Try Control-L and see what happens. Hold Control and then press L. Nothing happens. Okay.
Oh, actually, I will do it. Just.
Yeah, maybe.
Looks like a Mac. Will the green button help? Can you click the green button, Ahmed?
Green button?
At the top, yeah. Or the Mac buttons. To the top left, you have a red, yellow, and green button. See if you click on the green, and does that help?
Yeah, it's a Mac. I don't know how the Mac works.
Oh yeah, it's just.
Oh yeah. Go to Zoom, the one below, okay, and then choose maybe fit width and see what happens. Nothing happens.
Nothing happens.
That's okay. You can continue. I think
Actually,
it's visible. You can
I think
continue.
you should find it. Let me. I think it should be here.
Oh, full screen mode. Come down. It's actually 3 from the bottom.
Yeah, yeah.
The third one from the bottom. Okay. No, yeah, no, we don't. It's not
Actually,
much different.
Full
So
screen
go ahead.
right now. It's not full screen in yours. You can
No,
see.
it's not for us.
Not.
But that's okay. You
My
can
screen right now, it is the full screen. Let me share, maybe I just share my desktop instead of the PDF document.
Yeah. Share the desktop. Yeah.
I will, yeah, okay.
It was actually okay 5 minutes ago before we started the session.
No, I will, no.
The third one from the bottom, so if you come down, Beautiful.
Yeah. So the co-authors of this paper are the Hakan Ercan and Semih Tümen. So in this paper, we evaluate the causal impact of a large governmental school construction program on later outcomes. I will first give some background information on the program and also the data, and then I will discuss the effect of the school construction program on high school completion and labor force participation in Turkey. In Turkey in 1997, a law was passed to increase the compulsory schooling. And after the law, there was a massive primary school construction program started following the law. I will not discuss the detail of the law and the political motivation in my presentation as the time limited, but this law was mainly different from other traditional compulsory schooling law. First, it did not increase the legal dropout age or extend the duration of compulsory schooling. Instead, it introduced a continuous, uninterrupted 8-year compulsory education in the same building, and therefore this required a major expansion of school infrastructure because of two main reasons. First, there were approximately 1.5 million out of school children need to be schooled, especially for lower secondary education. And second, the implementation of law led to unutilized school facilities due to closure of 5-year primary schools in small villages, especially in rural areas, and the closure of lower secondary school within high schools. The government constructed approximately 67,000 new classrooms and also actually used his additional budget and also take some contribution from private sectors, private donation actually. So if you normalize, this is the 67,000 classrooms with school-age children, and we find that this actually makes an average of 6.2 classrooms per 1,000 children, and this corresponds to approximately a 30-point increase in the number of classrooms from 1998 to 2002. So in this figure, we will see the school enrollment rate in Turkey from 1994 to 2006. And before 1997, we only have data for 3 years. So for primary, 5-year primary school, the enrollment is approximately 90%. For 3-year lower secondary, it's close to 55%. So we also make an estimation for 8-year primary education. So it's approximately 75%. The important thing is that before 1997, there is no actually trend. It's almost stable, the enrollment rate. With the law and also other educational programs, the enrollment rate in primary education starts to increase and it comes to 90% approximately. So we also see a similar picture for enrollment rate for high school. So before 1998, there's no actually trend, it's almost stable. And after 1998, it starts to increase. So in this paper, we use a unique data set. We combine 2011 population and housing census and also the provincial educational data. And these are coming from the National Education and Statistics books published by Ministry of Education. So in this paper, we focus on individuals born between 1971 and 1993. This identification ensures that the individual in our sample completed their high schools. So approximately we have 3 million observations in our sample. So for identification, I basically provide 2 figures. The first one is shows the total number of classrooms in Turkish primary education. Unfortunately, we don't have data before 1997, but still actually this figure shows that and the increase in school enrollment is exogenous. So in 1997, in 1998, following the law, the increase in the number of classrooms is just 1%. However, in 1999, this is almost 50%. And these increase levels of after 2002. So the second figure shows the total investment of the Ministry of National Education in total public capital investment. So before 1997, actually the trend is stable, even if actually it declines. But in 1998, the share of total investment jumps 23 percentage points, and this increase comes back its previous position in 2003. And we also actually provide other evidence in our paper. Therefore, we conclude that the 1998 and 2002 period as the exogenous increase in the primary school construction program. And the year of birth and the province of birth join to determine an individual exposure to the school construction program. So which cohorts were affected from the program? So we actually discussed detail in our paper, but I don't take them as a slide in my presentation. But cohorts born in 1982 and before did not benefit from the construction program, and the cohorts born from 1983 and 1987 were partially affected, and those born in 1988 and after were completely affected from the school construction program. The second variation that we use in our paper is the net increase in number of classrooms. So this map actually shows that it substantially varies across provinces. So some provinces received more schools, some provinces received less schools from 1998 to 2002. So based on our assumptions and evidence, we apply a difference in difference strategy to find the effects of the program on high school and labor force participation. So this is the first table that I want to show my results. The table is shows the results of men for high school completion. So in all regressions, we control province of birth and year of birth fixed effect. We also control the primary school age population and the pre-enrollment rate in the province of birth. And we, of course, interacted these two variables with year of birth dummies, since these are the possible determinant variables of the program. And we also provide results when we control other governmental programs, such as boarding schools program and also the transportation program. In all specification, all standard errors are clustered by the individual's province of birth. So in panel A, we compare the difference between high school completion of a young cohort exposed to the program and that of an older cohort not exposed to the program. And the first column shows that the addition of one extra classroom for 1,000 children increased the high school completion rate of men by 0.37 percentage point, and who were exposed to the program. And since the total addition is 6.2 classroom per 1,000 children during the 1998 and 2002, the total effect of program is approximately 2.3 percentage point increase in the high school completion rate. So in the fourth column, actually the second and third column provide the results when we control other governmental programs, and our results are almost the same. We still find similar significant results. In fourth column, this time we apply two-way cluster robust standard errors based on the province of birth and year of birth. So in the fourth column, even if our standard errors decline slightly, actually slightly increase, our estimations are still significant.
Ahmed, you would have about 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mahdi. So this table shows the same estimates for women, and we find very similar results as those for men. Almost actually the effect of program is almost the same for men and for women in terms of high school completion rate. We also in panel B, this time we actually apply a placebo test. This time we compare two birth cohorts that were not affected from the program, and we find that all the results are not significant. So additional of these robustness checks, we also provide a second robustness checks by applying a generalizing interaction term analysis. And we would expect that the exposure of the program should increase with the birth cohorts for children born after 1982. As in my presentation at the beginning, I claimed that the birth cohorts after 1982 actually were affected from the program. So the coefficient for the cohorts born before 1982 fluctuate around 0. However, after 1982, the effect of program starts to increase, and all coefficients are significantly different from 0 except the 91 per cohort. So this systematic increase actually in the figure indicates that our strategy actually reasonable. So at this table, we show the results for the labor force participation, first for men. So in the labor force participation, we actually exclude agriculture sector, as the women employed in this sector are predominantly unpaid family workers. Therefore, we exclude them in our sample. So we do not find any significant results for men in terms of labor force participation, but for women, we find significant results. So the addition of one extra classroom for 1,000 children lead to 0.35, actually varies from 0.35 to 0.42 percentage point rise in female labor force participation, and the total effect of program varies from the 2.1 to 2.6 percentage points increase in the female labor force participation. So the reason behind this one is the labor force participation and education attainment, actually the relation of them is low for men, but this relation is very high for women in Turkey and also in other developing countries. So we also provide a similar robustness checks. We apply an interaction term analysis. For female labor force participation, we find significant results for the cohorts born affected. Additional to these two robustness checks, we also provide an estimation for the quality bias. So it's also possible that the program, maybe the estimation are biased because maybe the program also increased the quality of education. So we add a new variable, the net increase in the teacher ratio from 98 to 2002, and we find very similar results, and these are shown in column 2 and column 4.
Ahmed, we have a question, a clarification question. What is the age group for the labor force participation outcomes?
15 years and older, the adult population.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So another robustness checks, with this time we add a variable for construction of high school from 1998 to 2002. And similarly, we compare them with base findings, our base finding, and we find similar results. Therefore, the construction, actually our results are also robust to construction of high school from 1998 to 2002. So this study is the first thematic attempt to assess the impact of construction programs in Turkey, and this paper also has the literature examining the role of school construction in improving gender equality in labor market for Turkey and also for other developing countries. And this study also comprehensively analyzes the effect of construction program by controlling 2 other governmental programs. So basically we isolate our estimation by controlling these 2 programs in our estimations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ahmed, for the nice presentation and also for being in time and not going over time. Wonderful. So we would have now Mustafa Ulus presenting his paper. I would just wait for a second to see if there are any clarification questions, just clarification questions. If there are any clarification questions for Ahmed's paper. If not, we move on to Mustafa's paper, Mustafa and Insan's. All right, it seems there are no clarification questions. Ahmed, if you, yes, Insan, I think you.
So we're going to have a discussion afterwards, right? This is just for clarification. Okay.
Just clarification. Just clarification.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, Ahmed, you can unshare your screen, and then Mustafa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mehdi.
Sure.
Is it okay? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Perfect.
Perfect. thank you for having us in this conference. And this paper is a joint work with İnsan Tunalı, who is also here from Boğaziçi University and Koç University and ERF. And the title of our paper is Incentives and Exit Behavior, an Examination of Unemployment Insurance System in Turkey. And Turkey introduced an unemployment insurance system back in 1999, but we don't know much about its impact on the job search behavior of workers who receive unemployment benefits. So we use microdata obtained from the Turkish Employment Agency, better known by its Turkish acronym İşkur, to evaluate the usage patterns and incentive structures of this unemployment insurance system. I will very quickly give an overview of the unemployment insurance system in Turkey. As I thought I had only 10 minutes, I prepared it for a very quick presentation. So if I have to tell you just by 2 sentences the basic properties of the unemployment insurance system in Turkey, there are very strict eligibility conditions in order to be able to benefit from the benefits. There is very strict eligibility conditions, and the benefits are low. Just have a quick look at this about the eligibility conditions. In order to be able to benefit from the unemployment payments, unemployment insurance payments, workers have to pay at least 600 days of premiums before unemployment. So in the last 3 years, and potential benefit duration is tied to contributions of the unemployment insurance fund. And if a worker paid between 600 and 900 days of premium to the system, he or she can receive benefits for 180 days. And if the payments are between 900 and 1,080, worker can receive 240 days of benefits. And if the worker did not experience any unemployment spell in the last 3 years, the maximum number of days of unemployment insurance payments is 300. So the second thing about the benefit amount, the reservation replacement rate of the unemployment insurance system is 40% of gross wage, gross monthly wage, but it is kept at the 80% of the minimum wage. So this means that if you have an earning of 2 times, more than 2 times of minimum wage, there is no increase in the benefits with your earnings. Okay. So because of this strict eligibility conditions, very few workers benefit from the unemployment insurance system. But anyways, more than half of the individuals that receive benefits use them fully. If you look at the hazard rates to employment by potential benefit duration, 180, 240, and 300 days, you see a bimodal shape, which is very common in the unemployment insurance literature. And the first hump represents the heterogeneity of the workers, the best exit first. And the second hump represents the wake-up call. When workers approach to the end of benefits, they increase their search intensity probably, and they can go out from the system. So, is the magnitude or duration of unemployment benefits have a role in this bimodal shape, or our objective is to answer this question. So we try to answer the impact of unemployment insurance system on the exit behavior of workers. So our focal point is the exit to employment, exit hazard to employment, conditional on having unemployment insurance benefits. We examine the individual, institutional, and macroeconomic determinants of exit rates to employment using a stratified partial likelihood estimator popularized by Rieder and Tunalı by their Journal of Econometrics paper. I will give an explanation of this in a few minutes, but before that, I want to give a brief description of our data. We use a random sample drawn from İşkur administrative database of unemployment insurance recipients for the period of 2010 and 2016. And our working sample is about 80,000 records. After some cleaning in the data, we work with 90% of the original data. And our data gives us information about the unemployment insurance parameters, of course, the duration, potential benefit duration of the workers, the amount of their benefits. Also, we have information on the date of termination and date of exit to employment, which allows us to control for macroeconomic conditions, change in the macroeconomic conditions. We have usual demographic markers, age, gender, marital status, education. We also have local, we also have information about the location of residence or İşkur office handling the case, which allows us to control for the local labor market conditions. We also have sector of work before unemployment and type of termination, which will be important why the worker is in unemployment. So for our model, for our econometric methodology, we use a variant of Cox proportional hazard models, and our model exploits stratification that permits arbitrary baseline hazard functions at the level of strata. And as in the standard Cox models, effects of explanatory variables on the hazards are assumed to be constant across strata. And our stratification allows us actually obtain non-parametric estimates of cumulative baseline hazards by stratum and examine how the exit rate varies across strata. This is a handy modelization because this model renders our model suitable for handling the identification challenge posed by the variation in the statutory benefit duration. After all, the support of hazards of exit to employment vary by potential benefit duration. So stratified partial likelihood estimation allows us to adjust for differences in the support so that we can draw appropriate inferences. As for our estimation procedure, we move in two stages. The first stage is exploratory. We first start with non-parametric data analysis, and which reveals patterns that need explanations. And we use a reduced form investigation in order to establish associations between key observables such as unemployment payments or unemployment duration, unemployment insurance payments or potential benefit duration. And also we control for all demographics, etc. And we establish associations between key observables and exit rates, allowing for unobserved heterogeneity brought about by the differences in potential benefit duration. And we use the first stage results to arrive at the strategy for the next stage. And our second stage is a confirmatory stage. We use some quasi-experimental analysis that see causal connections between some unemployment system parameters and exit rates. Before the start of the system, there were no significant policy changes. So we use some specificities of the system in order to tease out the effects of unemployment insurance on the search behavior of the workers. We first use a diff-in-diff design, and we exploit the link between minimum wages and benefit amount. So the first important parameter, benefit amount. And second, we use a regression discontinuity design, and we exploit the discontinuity in the mapping from the accumulated premium payments to benefit durations. I will just give a very quick summary of first stage results and jump directly to the second stage results because they are more interesting, I believe. In the first stage results, we first start with non-parametric data analysis, and our results reveals that patterns are too complex to associate longer potential benefit duration with slower exit rates. So workers who have longer potential benefit duration does not always leave the system more slowly. And moreover, there are significant differences in Kaplan-Meier estimates of survival functions between sexes and termination types. And these results are confirmed by our reduced form estimation, initially stratified by potential benefit duration. And we found striking violations of the proportional hazard assumption for indicators of gender and type of termination. In fact, this is a classification based on the reason provided by the employer. We look at if the termination is initiated by the employer or the employee, or was it a fixed contract who terminated, or if there was a downsizing or closure, etc.
Mustafa, I just wanted to say that you have about 10 minutes left.
Okay, perfect. So we argue that both could serve as markers for differences in the re-employability of unemployment workers and stratify further by potential benefit duration, sex, and termination type. So in our stratification, we have 3 different dimensions. The ability to conduct the quasi-experiments under multi-dimensional stratification allows us protection against misspecification. And if I go directly to our quasi-experiments, the first one is a difference in difference setup. And we use the relationship between minimum wage increases and the benefits, unemployment insurance benefits. As I told you a few minutes ago, the benefits are kept at 80% of minimum wage. But in Turkey, there are regular minimum wage increases, mostly twice a year and sometimes once a year. And when there is a minimum wage increase, some workers, in fact, who lost their job just before the minimum wage increase and compared to other workers who lost their job after the minimum wage increase, although they have the same wage, they have different unemployment insurance payments. Accordingly, we compare their exit behaviors for workers who are between minimum wage and whose wages are between minimum wage and 2 times the minimum wage, are not affected by the change in minimum wage increase. But for workers who earn more than 2 times the minimum wage are affected by the increase. In fact, their unemployment payments are affected by the increase in the minimum wage. Accordingly, we constitute a treatment and control group. This first part here, the C0, T0 group, constitute our common trend group, actually, and there is no change in their payments. And for C1, T1, the increase is limited, and for C2, T2, the increase in the minimum unemployment benefits is bigger. And if T0 represents the baseline hazard estimate for the treatment group, so it's our common trend estimate. If we I skip to this, if we compare the T0 with C0, which means that the exit rate to employment after minimum wage increase, we see that workers exit to employment more slowly after the minimum wage increase for the group who are not affected by the minimum wage increase. But this is the same for other groups as well, for the treatment 1 and treatment 2 groups. And both for both groups, the workers exit to employment more slowly, yet they exit to employment. In fact, if we look at, for example, here, DD20 in the last row, DD20, D2 minus D0, which shows that the workers who are affected by the minimum wage increase exit to employment more quickly, not more slowly, more quickly compared to the group who are not affected by the unemployment increase. This means that we don't have a moral hazard problem after the increase in minimum wage. So no evidence of moral hazard problems in full difference in difference sample. But there's we can have a common trend assumption problem because it can be too strong. But we repeat the same exercise with just 2015-2016 group, where there was a 20% increase in the real minimum wage. The results did not change, and we realized some further sensitivity analysis to check whether the results are robust to change in the composition of treatment and control groups. We gradually excluded workers with the lowest wage in the C0T0 group and highest wage in C2T2 group in order to obtain a more homogeneous sample, but still no evidence of moral hazard problems. In the second stage, our second experiment was a regression discontinuity setup around the APP threshold that determined the potential benefit duration.
Mustafa, you have 5 minutes left.
Okay, I'm almost done. Relevant contrast is just between groups of individuals who are just below and just above the statutory thresholds for increased benefit durations. Think about like this: if a worker who just have premium payments of 890 days, he will receive 180 days of benefits. But if he have only 10 days or 15 days more premium payments, he will receive the benefits for 240 days. So if we compare the exit hazard for groups of people who are just below and just above the statutory thresholds, and if we compare their exit hazards, and if they have the same exit hazard, then we say that unemployment benefit duration has no impact on the job search behavior of the workers. And our empirical strategy is novel in that we look for the evidence of differences by PBD on all points of their common support. And we achieve this by examining the non-parametric estimates of the cumulative baseline hazards for the potential benefit groups on either side of the APP thresholds, conditional on gender and termination type. And we look for the visual evidence of hazard rate differences where supports overlap. And if increase in potential benefit duration slows down the exit rate over common support, we have evidence for moral hazard. Just let me show you some graphs. I don't know if you can see it clearly. This is for males, okay, and for different windows near the threshold, meaning that D is equal to 10, 20, 30 means that workers who paid 10 days less than 900 and 10 days more than 900, etc. And this is type A or C, employer-initiated terminations. What we see is in the common support, there is no significant difference in the exit rates of the workers. This means that there is no moral hazard effect. And if you look at the same thing for women, what we see is it looks like there's a effect for a short window of time, or a short window of 10 days. But when we increase the window around the threshold, this effect disappears. So there is once again no clear moral hazard effect. If we look at the males with employee-initiated termination, this time we see a consistent effect, which means that workers who have longer potential benefit durations exit the unemployment pool more slowly. And but note that the number of observations is quite small for this group. And for women, we don't have this effect for the employer-initiated terminations. And when we look at the fixed-term contracts for men, we don't have any clear relationship between the potential benefit duration and exit rate. But for women, we have some effect here. You can see in the last three graphs more clearly, perhaps. Potential benefit duration have some disincentive effects. But once again, the number of observations is not very high. Finally, when we look at the establishment closure, downsizing, or redundancy for men, we don't have any effect. And the same is true for women. We don't see any effect. If there's an effect, it's not a disincentive effect. On the contrary, workers who have higher benefit durations exit the employment more quickly. So to give a summary of the results, a 2-month increase in potential benefit duration does not look like slowing down the exit rates to employment. There's a weak evidence in favor. For males, it's the employee-initiated terminations, but it's just 3% of the whole sample, male sample. And for females, it's the fixed-term contracts. In fixed-term contracts, we have a weak evidence for the disincentive effects of unemployment benefits, but it's only 4.7% of the workers. To conclude, we studied the incentive properties of the unemployment insurance system in Turkey, and we used a stratified partial likelihood model to tease out the interplay between observed and unobserved heterogeneity. We didn't find any evidence in favor of moral hazard in our cross-section and quasi-experimental analysis. And this lends support for weaker eligibility conditions, especially more important in this pandemic period. And it looks like that a more generous unemployment insurance system can provide better protection to workers without not disturbing their search incentives in the negative manner. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Wonderful presentation. And I'm sure it was difficult, Mustafa, because the paper is very long and you crammed it into 20 minutes. So that's amazing. That's very good. Thank you so much. And if there are any clarification questions, just clarification questions, you can ask it now in the chat box or Q&A. I apologize to Shaukat Hamouda. I actually missed his question for the previous paper, but thank you, Insan Tunali, for answering those questions that Shaukat had. So very good collaboration. Thank you very much. All right, let's wait for questions. And in the meantime, I share my slides. Okay, Mustafa, I would appreciate it if 10 minutes into my presentation, you tell me that I have 10 minutes left. I try to be quick so that we would have time to cover. Thank you so much. Time to cover basically the Q&A. All right. So the first paper that I would like to review is the effect of primary school construction by Ahmed Usturk and Semi Tumen and another co-author. So my general comments, very solid paper, well done, very carefully done. It closely follows the seminal work by Esther Duflo. And you might have known that work. It's on school construction in Indonesia. It's a seminal work. It's highly cited. It's taught in graduate schools everywhere in the world. And it was done in Indonesia, the school construction. This is in Turkey. And it's lovely to see a similar national program somewhere in the Middle East and see the results of that. So my major comments, because it was basically following closely the Esther Duflo's paper, there is not much that can be said about the paper. The paper is very solid because it totally follows one of the best papers in the field. But I still have some comments on it. One is that in Turkey, the program was a mix of both enforcement of compulsory schooling laws and school building. So if the compulsory schooling laws are enforced differently across different provinces, and that different enforcement is or is not correlated regardless with school building, then we are not just identifying the effect of school building, we are identifying the effect of both. The other thing that I worry about is a classical worry about any difference in difference method that is done over a long period of time, and that is migration. So what the authors identify where the school that the respondent went to is based on where the respondent was born. So if you were born in an eastern province, let's say, you're assumed to have, basically go to school in the same province. But if the family, the household has migrated to a different province, then we are wrongly associating that respondent to the eastern province when he or she was actually somewhere else. But not much can be done about that. That just, that's a measurement error. It would attenuate the estimates, but at least we get a lower bound of the estimates. But a short discussion of migration would be useful in the paper because referees want that. And if you don't include it, referees are more likely to reject the paper. But if you include a discussion of migration, then the referees are more appeased by the discussion, at least. The other thing I would love to see is years of education, the impact on years of education, college enrollment or attainment, wages. I don't know if you have wages, but wages would be super interesting. Occupational ranking. If you don't have wages, at least if you have the occupations, we know some occupations are earning more than the others. Like we know if you are in a professional job, like if you're a lawyer, a doctor, and an engineer, you're making more than a technician, a low-skilled worker. So you can actually have a simple ranking of occupations and see if the ranking of occupations differ between the treated and control groups. And marital status and, eventually, 20 years from now, maybe fertility and so on. But these are interesting outcomes, all economic outcomes that would be interesting to see, and they are all impacted by education. And I would actually strongly encourage you to include the non-results because you have a large sample, and any non-results, any non-effect that you find. For example, if you don't find any effect on wages, that is super interesting because, one thing that is very interesting about your paper is that it's a national program. So you really identify the general equilibrium effects. The downside of your paper is that it's a difference in differences. So because it's a difference in differences method, you might not have the assumption of a common trend, even though you try to show that you do have assumption of common trend, but you may not. And that's the downside. But the upside is that it was a national program. It wasn't an RCT. So you can say things about general equilibrium effect. And if the general equilibrium effect is negligible, that is super interesting. And if you don't find any effect on wages, that is very interesting to me, at least. Because we see that, yes, education went up, but wages didn't change. So at the end, the general equilibrium effect is negligible. Then what Esther Duflo does, especially in her successive paper, 2004 paper, she actually calculates the cost-benefit analysis of the program. That it was about $3 billion expenditure every year by the Ministry of Education in Turkey. Okay, what was the result on the benefit side? Especially if you have results on wages, you can find, okay, if the wages went up by 3%, so you can do a calculation, a back of the envelope calculation on cost benefit analysis of the program, which would be super interesting. It's not going to be all the benefits of the program because education is multifaceted. It would affect everything, not just wages, but it's still interesting. If the cost benefit analysis turns out to be net positive, that's really interesting just on wages. That's really interesting because it shows that the program was really effective. I have some minor comments. I'm going to skip those. You can read them later. So those were my major ones. Now let me switch to the second paper on the review on the incentives and exit behavior in Turkey based on the unemployment insurance program. I'm actually impressed that Turkey has an unemployment insurance program that is really impressive. I'm not sure how many other countries in the Middle East especially do have that. And it's lovely to see the result of this program, even though it was not a big program and the payments were low, but still it's very interesting to see the results. So my general comments, it's a paper that thoroughly and carefully looked at the data. So that's always very welcoming. I strongly recommend all the junior researchers to look at these two papers, because that tells you how to really carefully do data analysis and make sure that your results are robust. And it's well written, pays particular attention to details. As I said, it's very important, especially for junior researchers. I have no comments on the SPL estimator and the estimates. It was done by the master, Professor Ensantunali. He and Professor Gert Riede, they developed the method. And so they are the masters, and the paper has been written by a master. So I have no comment on that. But I may disagree on the execution of difference in differences and regression discontinuities. So let's start with the difference in differences. First, I would not recommend using nonlinear models for difference in differences estimation. For difference in difference estimations, the general recommendation is that we should not use, for example, logistic regression or probit regression, or any regression that uses sort of maximum likelihood estimators or nonlinear estimators, non-parametric estimators even. So always use linear regression, and that's the recommendation by Joshua and Grace. So I would use a simple linear regression for the difference in differences method. And I'm going to tell you how I would do it. So instead of the hazard models, I would use a linear regression with the number of days someone was on UI, right? The number of days someone was on UI as the dependent variable. So instead of, hazard of the exit, I would just have the number of days someone was on UI. Yes, it is left censored, but that is okay. That is totally okay. It's left censored for both groups, treated and control. So your notations for DID is also non-standard, but this is a minor issue. So this is how I would do it.
10 minutes, sorry, yeah. 10 minutes.
5 minutes? 5 minutes or 10?
10
minutes. Excellent. I have time. Great. So what I would do is this. I'm going to simplify the problem much more. So I would say this part would be the control group, right? Because for them, as Mustafa said, the benefits doesn't change. The benefits don't change before and after the minimum wage rise. So they would be the control group. And then all these guys, I would take them as treated group. This is the simplest form of difference in difference that we're going to do. I'm going to show you the more complex form too, but this is just for clarification. So these guys would be the treated group, because for them, as Mustafa said, benefits change after the minimum wage changes, right? It changes from the black line to the red line. So what I would do is that I would run a simple linear regression model. I would have days on UI on the left-hand side, and I would have, of course, whether the individual belongs to the control or treated group, DI, before and after the minimum wage rise, and then the interaction of the two. That's it. And then a bunch of controls. You can use any controls. You can use, for example, that termination type. You can use anything, gender, etc. And here you can also use UI benefits. UI benefits for individual I at time t. That's also fine. But DIT, the interaction of DIT is cleaner, simpler, and I would first do that, and then I would include UI benefits. And then the coefficient of interest would be beta, right? Of course. And then if I want to alternative specification, if I want to have two treatment groups, as Mustafa and Insan in their paper, I would have two different binary variables for the two different treatment groups, and I would have two interactions. That's very standard. And beta 1 and beta 2 would be the effect, the average treatment effect according to differences for each treatment. But even if I do that, I still worry about the estimates. And the worry that I have is that the composition of the control and treated groups, in other words, the distribution of wages within each group, change in different ways over time. Let me explain it quickly what I mean by that. Imagine, so as I said, these guys are control, right? This is control. And these guys, all of them are treated in the simple form. Imagine we have only 2 groups. So this first point that you see, imagine this is an extreme case. Imagine everybody in the control group, has had a minimum, everybody's wage was a minimum wage at time t, and their benefit was equal to 40% of minimum wage at time t. So the wage was minimum wage at time t, and the benefit was just 0.4 times minimum wage at time t. And then for everybody in the treated group, the wage was equal to 2 times minimum wage at time t plus 1. The wage at time t in the treated group was already equal to this. Imagine, right? That's just an assumption. And let's see what happens. As time passes, so as minimum wage changes for some reason, imagine the distribution changes. Now, everybody in the control group, their wage moves up to 2 times minimum wage at time t, right? They are still in the control group, but now they are on the other extreme, right? Their benefits would rise just because the distribution of wages changed. The benefits would rise, even though they are in the control group. And imagine in the treated group, everybody's wages decline to 2 times minimum wage. This should be 2 times minimum wage at time t. I should erase this. 2 times minimum wage at time t. So it goes down, right? And the benefits stay the same, 0.8 times minimum wage at time t. So the distribution narrowed. So there was a more inequality before the minimum wage change. After the minimum wage change, not because of the change in minimum wage, but because of other reasons, inequality declined, and wages contracted, like the distribution contracted. So now it's just the effect of change in distribution. Nothing else changed. The benefits for the control group is 0.4 times minimum wage, the difference between these two numbers, right? Their benefits changed this much. Benefits for the treated group didn't change at all. Didn't change at all, even though we see the red line, but nobody is on the red line. And then this is like the control group was actually treated, but the treated group wasn't treated. I don't think of course, you don't have this extreme case in your data, but what I would love to see is the distribution of wages in the control group before and after the minimum wage. If the distribution doesn't change much, that's very promising. And I think it wouldn't change much, but I think I would report that because that might affect the results. On the regression discontinuity, I just have 2 comments. Again, I would do the same thing as difference in differences. I would use days on UI benefit as my dependent variable. Not hazard rates, not like that. I would use just days on UI benefit, and I would use a simple RD. But before that, I would definitely do a Macrary test, and it's easy to do in a Stata. There is a command RD density. What you do basically in Macrary test is that you try to make sure that the distribution below and above the threshold, the density doesn't change much. And the density is smooth. So nobody just jumped over the line, right? And the distributions are not so starkly different. It doesn't look like they are starkly different, but you have to do the test anyway so that you get the numbers. But it seems that the distribution starkly changed at the second threshold at 1080. So I would worry about that threshold. But the results for this one should be quite nice. And then for the regression discontinuity itself, as I said, instead of the hazard model, I would use the local polynomial regression discontinuity estimation with robust bias corrected confidence intervals. But I would use days on UI as the dependent variable. The good news is that, again, there is a command in Stata that does it for you automatically, so you don't have to do local polynomial regressions yourself. You just run RD robust, and then days on UI, and then your running variable is on. Your running variable would be APP, accumulated premium payments. And then the threshold would be 900. You can also change it to 1080, but just make sure that the densities don't change before and after the threshold. All right, last major comment. You are reporting too many things in the paper. You can split your paper into 2 papers, for example, I think. Or for example, you may not report the SPLE analysis. You have SPLE analysis in another paper, and then you just have difference in difference and regression discontinuity in the second paper. Yes, as a rule of thumb, you should have at most 7 tables and figures combined in a paper. So that's about it. I have some minor comments, but I skipped those. Thank you so much, and I would be happy to stop sharing and let everybody pitch in if they have any questions. Let me just pull up the. So if you have any response, if I made any mistake, and if you have any response, feel free to say that. But before that, let me just make sure that there are people who have raised their hands. Who has raised their hands? And if they have any questions, they would go first. Okay, so far, I don't see anyone raising their hands. And we have about 15 minutes. Ensan and Ahmed and Mustafa, if you have any response or any comments to make. Otherwise, we can wait for people to ask questions.
First of all, thank you very much for your wonderful contributions. So in this data, unfortunately, we don't have wage data. So the wage question, we're not asked to people in the census, but we have occupation data. I think we can look at the effects of program on occupation. How does it affect occupation ranking? And also the general equilibrium effects, cost-benefit analysis. I think they should also improve the paper. For migration, actually, we make a regression. So we don't have the data for the province, for the time of they start to high school, but we run a regression for those the province of birth and the province of residence are the same for those people. So we restrict the sample and we find very similar results. So therefore, we think that so our results are robust to inter-provincial migration. But I think we should look at the occupation data and also look for other generic equilibrium effects. And of course, the cost-benefit analysis. Thank you very much for your valuable contributions, Dr. Mahdi.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mehdi. This was a wonderful and very constructive discussion. Thanks for your time and for your suggestions. It's really nice to have them. I'll just start with the last one, perhaps, as you told we are not very sure about the regression discontinuity at 1080 because it's right censored. So probably we will focus on just 900, and the distribution is quite uniform around 900. So we are very quite confident about that. But otherwise, for the use of not use of hazard functions, Insan Hoca sure will answer this better than me. He's the master, as you told. I have to give all the credit to him for this work. But what this hazard, this specification allows us is to compare the hazards on the joint support for at all points, not only one if they are different from the people who have just APP with 850 and with 950, not just a parameter estimator about for the difference, but we can compare it at all the points of the joint, the common support. So I think this is quite handy, or in order to see the difference in the behavior of the unemployed workers. But perhaps Insan Hoca can say more about it. But anyways, thank you so much for your comments, and I will be very glad if you can share your comments with us. I will be very glad.
I'll be more than happy. Thank you. Your hand is up, please.
Mehdi, thank you. That was a very, very helpful way of looking at the problem. I think the DD might work the way you have it, but not the RD, because people on the left side of 900, they only have 180 days. Those on the right-hand side, they have 240. So you really cannot compare them. It's what lead to credible results, because the point that Mustafa was making about relying on a hazard comparison is we keep the supports as they are. We either we allow for differences in support, and then we compare their behavior in the range where the supports overlap. I think that's a major contribution. I haven't seen anyone do that. But the DD, we should take a serious look at. My concern there is there's still a lot of unobserved heterogeneity. If you remember the graphs with two bumps, the hazard graphs with two bumps, so people who exit early are actually very different from people who exit late or do not exit, right? So again, the hazard approach allows us to take this into consideration. When you do regression, there's no obvious way to do that. You perhaps will confine your regressions to different ranges of the support and try to learn, which is something we might want to do. Thank you very much. Certainly worth keeping in mind. And yes, the paper started as one and it became two in one, and we should find a way to split it. So we'll be taking your major and minor comments as we make that decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, I see one hand up. Shaukat's hand is up. Shaukat, would you like to go ahead? Shaukat, you can unmute yourself, or you can type in the chat box. In the meantime, Enson, you raised a really good point about that I totally missed, about the fact that the maximum number of days are different, around the threshold. And so one suggestion that I would have is to divide the number of days by the maximum number of days, like on the left side by 180, on the right side by 240. and see as a share of like the total numbers that they could get, what was the average on either side of the threshold. It's not ideal. It has its own problems, but it's a standard RD. Yes, and you would get a standard RD graph and everything. In case the reviewers were like worried about the hazard model in an RD regression, that can be an alternative. Like you can try different journals and see if they like the methodology. If they don't, this would be an alternative. But very good points.
Yeah, I mean, I thought about, we talked about this with Mustafa, using the fraction of time used, but that's a nonlinear transformation, right? Now, the whole point that you were making was we want to go away from these nonlinear models, make things as simple as possible. And now we introduce this nonlinear transformation. And given my point about hazards, I'm not sure how far we can go with that. But early on, years ago, when we first started, I actually ran some regressions like that, and then thought that the hazard framework would be more promising, but it has its own challenges. Thank you. Keep on thinking.
Shoutout or anybody else who is in the participant, who is among the participants, if you would like to.
Yeah, I have a question to Ahmed, actually. I enjoyed the paper, Ahmed. I was wondering why you did not confine the LFPR, the participation analysis, to a smaller window. I mean, after all, there are many reasons why participation behavior at older ages can change that may have very little to do with this education reform. If anything, you might get a placebo test out of it, because some people are affected by it, others, earlier generations weren't. Now, of course, you have labor force participation rates at different points in their life cycles. I don't know if you have the data to somehow do something about that, but I thought that you should be looking at the participation rate at the lower end rather than the entire age group. What do you think?
We actually compared just 4 years, 4 birth cohorts. This is actually an important limitation in our paper, because the last 2 cohorts in our treatment group, we think they are still in college in 2011. So we used just 6 birth cohorts for our treatment groups. And the last 2 were still in college in 2011. This is actually one of the limitations in our study. Therefore, for labor outcomes, we just think this is the early outcomes. So actually, the main problem is the data, because this program was implemented in 1997, and we have data in 2011. So the census actually was implemented in 2011. So if, for example, if we can use labor force survey, then probably we can do that. But in labor force survey this time, the data was not given in provincial levels. So in this case, we just have 26 observation, and this is not enough actually to find the effects of the program. So we need a census, maybe the next census, 2021, and then probably we have more rooms to investigate the causal effects of the program on labor markets.
If I can have another suggestion, Ahmed, let me see if I can do this, if I can share my screen. Now, one of the unintended consequences of this education reform was obviously, the period of schooling was increased, and as a result, dropout rates were affected. Let me show you what I have here. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I see this.
Okay, so this is a very simple graph. Looks at educational attainment of 15 to 19-year-old people from the Household Labor Force Survey, which has some drawbacks because some of the kids in this age may not be residing at home with their parents. With that caveat aside, if you look at this dark line at the bottom, right, that's the people who we classify as literate but no diploma, because they learned, to read and write, but they don't have any diploma to offer. And obviously, as the schooling years increased from 5 to 8, more people were at the risk of becoming literate without a diploma, right? You had more years to cover before you could earn any diploma. So look at this. This is really incredible. It starts creeping right after the reform, 1998. And by year 2006, 10% of those in the 15 to 19-year-old group do not have a diploma. This is a huge handicap in the labor market. And if you look at it by gender, it's 14% for girls and 7% for boys. I think you can study this with your data set. It would be an excellent data set to study.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
So think about that.
This is very interesting. Yeah, I will take the note of it.
So Shaukat was able to type in his question. Let me just quickly ask his question. He says, he has a question about the first paper, Ahmed's paper, and he says, is there a crowding effect from private capital investment on public capital investment in education in Turkey? I think crowding out effect or crowding in effect. So Ahmed, or anyone
Actually, what do you mean by crowding effect?
Yeah, so I think what he means is that if there is, for example, if the government comes in and invests in the private schools, not in the private schools, in education, would that crowd out private investment? So, individual investments like rich people who want to build schools, they would say, you know what, the government is building that, so I don't want to build the schools anymore. So they would get out of the market for school building.
Oh, actually, the primary school is compulsory for the primary education, and I will not expect that one. The main reason behind it. So in 1997, government and actually the private sector, so they work together, and the government also used the private donation enormously to build schools. But I will look at it, especially to primary, to private investment for private schools. Is the investment affected or not during the 90 period? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Enson has his hand up. Yes.
I remember a number like 2 or 3%. That's the share of private schools overall, and it's probably a lot lower, as Ahmed said, at the elementary level.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't think that would happen. But this reminds me of something. You brought up the fact that they're looking at the effect of school construction as well as enforcement, because there was really a very serious effort at enforcement. In fact, there were penalties if parents did not send their children. Penalties could be imposed. Some may have been given cash benefits. I'm a little hazy on that, but Murat Kırdar and colleagues have looked at it carefully. They have a couple of published papers where this information should be available. And also busing. Busing was an important component, especially early on, because the school construction was obviously lagging, so they used busing to remedy it. Now, how that interacts with the way the treatment intensity is measured is worth considering, because there's obviously something else which is pushing enrollments, busing, and in areas where there wouldn't be any classrooms, kids still could go to other schools. On the other hand, this probably affected elementary schools more than high schools. High schools, I don't know how much busing there was in high schools. High schools are not as widely distributed. And so you may also have to worry about access to high school, by virtue of where the children are residing. Their chances of enrolling in a high school can be very different. I don't know about this data set, but if it's only province level, there's not much you can do about that. But if there's sub-district, district level information, then you can look at the distance to nearest high school and so on, and perhaps do something about that. I very much welcome using another data set, but I don't know much about it. Well, is it possible, Ahmet? What do you think?
I think in our regression, first of all, we control the transportation effect, so the intensity of busing. We also control the other program, like the pension or the together with the busing. But still, our results are similar to our base findings.
If I can barge in one more. So you reported an effect about 2.3%, right? When you took. Yeah, which is a bit lower than what others have found, right? My recollection is that, I've seen estimates as high as 3.5% at the high school enrollment level. Any comments on that?
So actually, if we look at the enrollment, we find that there are like about 10 percentage point increase, but this, of course, is a combination of programs. So the one of them is the construction schools, and the other program, as you say, that this is the transportation and also the pension programs and also composite schooling. So all of them actually make a huge effect. So we try to isolate that, and we find that this is about 3 percentage points for just the construction of high schools. Probably this is the reason we find a lower effect compared to other studies. And one more, I think I'm making one more comment about the enforcement. Even if there are enforcement, but still the enrollment rate is actually approaching 90%. We still have 10% people who are not schooled actually in this time. And also you show that the people who have actually read and write, but their ratio increased with time after the 1998. And one of the reasons is that they actually do not say they stop to provide the primary school diploma. So instead, they actually give the primary education diploma after the 8-year education. So if one of them actually drops before the 8th grade, and unfortunately, they do not have any grade, any diploma after 1998.
All right. I think we have 2 more minutes, if I'm right, or do we have time until 11:40? So we have just 2 questions from Shakat. He says, is there an effect of Syrian refugees on a school building? And currently, and yes, Insan says no. And then, does compulsory education apply to Syrian refugees in Turkey?
Ahmed, you're the boss.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, probably I expect that this probably. I don't know. Actually, I don't have any information on the Syrian population, and actually, we still continue to try to cover all the Syrian population. Probably some children maybe cannot be right now covered in the schools. So, but I have no exact information on the Syrian population.
Thank you.
I thought, when is your data from? It's a cross-section data set. When was it collected?
Is 2011.
Mhm.
So before Syrians
Yeah,
actually
before
arrived,
Syrian,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So there is no the Syrian population actually in our data.
Yeah.
So you're lucky.
Cool. Excellent. I think if our time was until 11:30, I'm not sure. Basically the session is done. Otherwise, we are happy to
Yeah,
answer
we can go on. I mean, if people
Yeah.
have things to say,
Totally.
Based on my previous sessions, I don't know if Shireen is there. She can warn us if there's another session that starts soon, but I doubt
Yeah.
it.
I doubt it is. Well, yeah.
We still have about 10 participants. I don't know if they have something to contribute to what we talked about. Maddie, the 1080 group, you know, the ones that have the maximum benefits, at that point, the premium days are truncated. So we don't know exactly how many premium payments, how many days of premium payments they made. And this is a problem. Some of these people, Mustafa didn't have the time to get into it, but since we're all labor economists, I think this is worth bringing up. We took this premium payment as a sign of how good a worker you are, right? Because that's the days that you spend on paid employment. And these people at the 1080, you know, they didn't have a single day of non-employment during 3 years. That's really impressive. So we said, these are the cream of the cream. But then when we discovered that their non-parametric estimates of their hazards of exit were slower than the 240 group, the lower group, we said, what's going on? And what's going on is some of these people are clearly getting laid off at a very late point in their careers, and they simply aren't going to go back to work because those jobs have disappeared.
Yeah.
So that's another paper waiting to be written. We can only say so much about it with this current data set, but that's a fascinating subject waiting to be researched, because first time we have this clear-cut evidence of not having the skills. Even though you have a very good employment record, you just don't have the skills to go back to employment because of technological change. So
I totally agree with that. Like, there is a literature on that in the US, but I haven't seen anything in a developing country. And that the developing country context is
haven't either. I haven't either. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that would be really wonderful. That, like, you know, workers with a lot of experience, they are basically excluded from the market. And after they are laid off, like at older ages. Yeah. So, which is sort of puzzling, but it's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, since, well, I mean, if we could, there's so many things that perhaps can be done, but access to data is still quite difficult, as you probably know.
Yeah.
Yourself.
Yes,
you know.
I forgot about the fact that you're right, that the number of days that they were on UI benefits were truncated. So even doing a regression discontinuity is not useful. I might even exclude them from the diff and diff regressions too, because we don't really know how many days they were on UI benefits.
No. We do know. We do know how many days of benefits they had. There's no problem there. But it's just that, you couldn't do a Macrary density test, for example, because we don't have the APP.
Oh, we don't have the APP.
No.
I see.
Yeah, and
everybody would be right after the threshold, basically.
Yeah, they
So there
all
is no
show up
regression
there.
design.
Yeah, there's no
You
test
can
to
do
be
a
done
diff
there.
and diff there, but no regression
No,
design.
so we gave up on doing the RD at 1080. The version of the paper that you received, it takes time to put the new work into an existing paper, and so there's a lag there.
Sure.
Apologies
No,
about that.
that's very natural. Wonderful. Any questions from our distinguished audience? Feel free to use the chat box if you can't unmute yourself. This session was actually emblematic of like two very solid papers on the Middle East. And I hope we see more and more of such papers in the future. Like what Middle East needs is really more scholarly work on these important topics that eventually would have impacts on policy. And I was recommending actually Hoda, and I should actually maybe talk to other people about this, that maybe we need a separate type of conference for papers with lower quality, so that those papers can get really a lot of feedback in a longer period of time. Like, every paper would have 1 hour, and then, people like Ensign, people like who are like experts in the field would comment on those papers in one hour, sort of like what NBER does with their conferences, but those would be for lower quality papers, so that we would have sort of like capacity building. The other option I was thinking about is maybe we can have a mentorship program that like our senior scholars would mentor junior scholars from underrepresented countries, let's say in west of North Africa, in the GCC countries, so that we can actually raise the quality of literature in those countries. I think Turkey has such solid literature, and we hope that every country in the Middle East would have one day such really quality literature on their labor market economics.
Well, that's development. You would expect that, but then so many things interfere with development in our parts of the world. So I think ERF did a little bit of that. There are these workshops, topical workshops. I don't know if you've had the chance to participate in them. So that kind of draws a more junior people.
That's true.
I don't know if it would have worked given the pandemic conditions. I mean, when we started using these webinars, I was really excited. I said, I could go to seminars I would never be invited to, but it only lasted, I don't know, 9 and 10 months. And after a while, you realize that the face-to-face interaction is very different.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think in the case of the ERF conference, we've had, I mean, I attended, I don't know, I think I attended four sessions altogether, which is a lot less than what I would have attended had this been an in-place conference, right? And those in many of them, I couldn't even tell how many participants there were. Today, we had a maximum of 15 or 16 participants, which is very low compared to live labor sessions, because we could fill these small rooms in the palace with 30, 40 people at times. And so I really miss that. And I think one reason is because people are doing so many things. It's very hard to find the time to attend these sessions. But if it's a 3-day conference, you're there and you have nothing else to do, but your job is to attend these sessions. So
Yeah.
I look forward to going back to the usual format of the annual conference. I miss it badly.
Hope so. Let's hope so. Yeah, me too.
Maggie, what are you working on? I see your twins paper has been published. What are you working on?
Yeah, so these days I'm actually working on a project in Cameroon. We are studying the long-term impacts of dust storms in sub-Saharan Africa, particularly in Cameroon and Benin. And we found very interesting results that like the pollution levels affect long-term outcomes like years of education, disability, and to some extent, occupational ranking of people who were exposed to more dust storms and to more pollution. So we hope that we can actually send it soon for review somewhere. So that's one type of work. And then, actually, Shireen is with us.
Hi.
Hello.
I missed a lot of the good discussion.
You did. It was wonderful. It was a wonderful session. I learned a lot, and the papers were great.
Brilliant. I was there for a lot of the paper. I just had to go in and out for that other meeting. I apologize.
No problem.
My loss. I'm gonna follow it on the YouTube, most certainly.
Me too, actually. Maybe I would rewatch it.
Okay, so are you all done?
Yes, I think there are no more questions.
You have Dr. Shaukat Hamouda's hand raised. Do I?
Yes, he asked his questions. He was not able to unmute himself, but he asked his questions through the Q&A.
Okay, lovely.
We talked about them.
We're in the
he has a new
socializing. We're in the socializing segment.
Oh,
Shireen.
okay. It's lovely to see you all, isn't it?
It is actually, and someone was saying that, it would have been wonderful. It would be wonderful if next time we would see each other in person. And
Absolutely.
yeah, he raised very good points about how the in-person conferences are much more fruitful than the online conferences. But I think pulling off an online conference is is probably harder even. And thanks to you and Hoda and everybody else, I think we have done a great job. And I'm glad that the sessions are recorded so I can rewatch them.